I was sued by my parents for money in court, and the moment it became clear that they couldn't get it, my stepbrother became violent. I've been through many painful experiences, and though it's difficult to look back on them, I want to take this opportunity to share my story in hopes of lightening the burden on my heart, even if just a little. At 28, this is the first time I'm opening up publicly about myself. I hope this story can offer support to anyone feeling isolated. Since I was a child, I always felt lonely within my family. My parents, Sophia and Daniel, were different from typical parents. In my memory, they were both physically and emotionally abusive, causing much of my pain and suffering. I have 2 younger sisters, making me the eldest of 3. While my parents treated my sisters gently, for some reason I was always the target of their anger and frustration. Fearful moments are deeply etched in my memories. My parents would insult and beat me under the guise of discipline. When I was 5, I tried to pour myself a glass of milk, but I didn't manage to do it properly. My father, seeing this, became furious. He grabbed my arm, dragged me into the living room, and pushed me onto the sofa, scolding me, saying, "How can you not even do something as simple as that?" My mother was also there, but she just stood by and watched. Things like this were an everyday occurrence in our household. From kindergarten through high school, school life was also challenging. I was bullied, and the other students knew about my situation at home too. Unlike other children, I couldn't feel the happiness they did. I wasn't allowed to have new clothes and often wore worn-out clothes, which made me a target for ridicule. Even when I wanted to play games with others, I was ridiculed and wasn't even allowed to join. I tried to talk to a teacher about it, but they didn't believe me and didn't seem interested in getting involved. When I entered middle school, the situation worsened. One of the most unforgettable events happened in 7th grade. A group of girls ambushed me in the bathroom, mocking my appearance, shoving me to the ground, pulling my hair, and hurling insults at me. When I tried to escape, one of them grabbed my backpack and threw all my books and belongings into the toilet. They laughed as they humiliated me, and all I could do was stand there, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't confide in anyone about what happened. I understood that standing up for myself would only make things worse. The situation continued even as I moved on to high school. The bullying became even more cunning and cruel, subjecting me not only to physical harassment, but also driving me to emotional despair. My classmates targeted me, spreading malicious rumors about me on social media, with messages that seemed to suggest I should disappear. One day, I found a note in my locker. "No one would be sad if you died." The words of that note have stayed with me to this day. I couldn't get those words out of my head and carried that note with me for weeks. I was completely isolated, with no one to turn to for support. My life at home during high school was also a nightmare. The abuse from my parents only worsened. They constantly put me down, telling me I was someone who could accomplish nothing. My father was consumed by alcohol, and I could never predict when his anger would explode. It was pure fear. One night, he came home drunk, furious that dinner wasn't prepared. When I explained that I had class and couldn't cook, he suddenly slapped me across the face. The impact made everything go white for a moment. As always, my mother didn't intervene. Instead, she scolded me, saying it was my fault for making him angry. Somehow, I managed to get into college, thinking that I could finally cut ties with my past and start a new life. But the scars in my heart ran deep. I lacked confidence in myself and didn't know how to navigate a normal environment. It was as if I were a shell of a person. From the very first day, college life presented numerous challenges. I found it difficult to make friends or trust others, and by the second year, I was constantly anxious about what the next ordeal would be. My roommate was a person named Jessica. At first, she seemed nice, but soon she revealed her true colors, criticizing my appearance and lifestyle. Knowing that I had early morning classes, she would invite her friends over and throw loud parties that lasted late into the night. When I pointed it out, she just looked at me, laughed, and said, "You should really relax more." One day, when I returned to the dorm, I found the room locked. I had no choice but to sleep in the common living room. However, the next day, she acted as if nothing had happened. There were some positive aspects of college, and a few professors showed concern for me. One of them, Professor Adams, sensed that I was struggling and offered to give me private tutoring sessions. He was incredibly kind and patient, and for the first time I felt I could rely on someone. Thanks to his support, I was able to graduate without failing any courses. However, the wounds from my childhood and adolescence were deeply ingrained. After graduating, I moved to a new town to start a new life. I began working in marketing and tried to move forward, but the traumas of the past continued to haunt me. Building relationships was difficult, and I often found myself in troubling situations. My self-esteem plummeted, and I struggled with depression and anxiety. I eventually met a therapist who supported me, and I began treatment. Thus began the long journey of healing, gradually easing the pain in my heart. One of the toughest challenges was talking about my parents and the abuse. It took me several years to gather the courage, but I finally took action. I wrote a long letter to my parents, detailing what they had done to me and the impact it had on my life. As expected, there was no apology from them. Instead, my mother responded by returning the letter, saying that I was being excessive and ungrateful. My father, on the other hand, showed no reaction, but writing the letter lifted a bit of the weight off my heart. It was a way for me to release a part of my trauma. I am still working hard to heal myself. There are good days and bad days. One of the best decisions I made was to cut off contact with my parents. I was also able to build a small network of people who understand my past and trust me. I can trust people again and feel that I am worth seeking happiness. The road is still long, but I'm moving forward one step at a time. When I first met Dr. Smith, my therapist, I was in a very unstable state. I remember the first session as clearly as if it were yesterday. I was so nervous and anxious that I couldn't even look at her face. Still, Dr. Smith was patient and created a safe environment where I felt comfortable sharing my feelings. After a few sessions, I was able to talk about my childhood. Whenever she spoke to me in her gentle voice, I always looked down. One of the most important moments in my treatment was when Dr. Smith talked about compassion and asked me how I would treat a friend who had gone through the same situation. Would I condemn them or see them as worthless? I would never feel that way. I would treat them with compassion and kindness. She told me that I needed to treat myself in the same way. It was a new feeling for me, but it gradually led to a new way of thinking about myself. We used various techniques to address past trauma, including eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. EMDR was a challenging process for me. It required me to recall my most painful memories. But at the same time, I felt it was incredibly effective. Through therapy, I began to feel lighter and more positive. I was considering building a career in marketing. After graduating from college, I joined a marketing company. While I wanted to demonstrate my abilities, my lack of confidence held me back. The first few months at the company were memorable. I was pouring all my efforts into a campaign proposal for a new client. I was excited to present my ideas in the meeting, but my manager, Mr. Thompson, repeatedly interrupted me, questioning my ideas and causing me to lose confidence. I left the meeting in shock, reflecting on what I might be lacking. Dr. Smith helped me analyze the incident. She taught me that Mr. Thompson's behavior said more about him than it did about me. He was known for being critical and harsh, often using his position to undermine others. With her guidance, I was able to clearly present my ideas the next time, supporting my proposal with solid data and standing by my position even in the face of opposition. It was incredibly difficult, but that experience helped me build confidence. Furthermore, I was entrusted with larger projects and I was growing significantly. I understood that facing challenges head-on was essential for overcoming them, so I took on difficult tasks. Then came a campaign to revamp a major client's brand, the largest project I had ever been involved in. This assignment involved significant risks, and along with motivation, I also felt a sense of anxiety. I spent countless hours conducting research, brainstorming ideas, and examining them from various angles, revising them over and over. On the day of the presentation to the client, I felt a level of nervousness I had never experienced before. Surprisingly, however, the presentation went smoothly, and the client highly praised my proposal. Moreover, even Mr. Thompson, who had previously been critical, acknowledged my achievement. This was my greatest success and a pivotal moment in my career. I began to feel confident in myself and my abilities. Outside of work, I realized I could accomplish more than I had thought possible. I was also steadily growing in my personal life. Dr. Smith encouraged me to actively explore hobbies and art. I started drawing again, an activity I had enjoyed as a child, and found joy in it. When I joined a local art class, I experienced an incredible sense of healing. It was a way to express myself beyond words and to transform my emotions into something beautiful. Furthermore, I started building a support network. I joined an online community that supports victims of abuse, and connecting with others who had similar experiences provided me with emotional support. We shared our experiences, supported one another, and celebrated each other's successes. Even these small connections were invaluable to my healing process. At work, new challenges awaited, providing opportunities to test my abilities. A new colleague named Lisa joined us. Mr. Thompson held her in high regards. She seemed intelligent, confident, and capable of anything. I feared her presence and felt uneasy about my own significance fading away. It was as though I had returned to my old fear of inadequacy and lack of self-confidence. Dr. Smith helped me work through and overcome these feelings. She taught me that Lisa's success didn't diminish my own value and explained that by cooperating and supporting each other, we could achieve better results for everyone. I took the initiative to offer my support for Lisa's project. To my surprise, she gladly accepted my offer and actively incorporated my suggestions. Together, we achieved great results, and I learned a lot from her. It was an experience that taught me the value of teamwork and the importance of mutual encouragement. As my career progressed, I was given leadership responsibilities and received a promotion. I became a project manager and was entrusted with overseeing a team. This was a significant advancement for me, and I strove to support and encourage my team as a leader. I held regular meetings, ensuring everyone had a chance to share their ideas and opinions freely. I prioritized recognizing and celebrating the team's achievements, even the small ones. Watching the team grow and succeed was an incredibly fulfilling experience. One particularly memorable project was a nationwide advertising campaign for a new product launch. It was a large-scale project with high expectations and a tight deadline. Though I anticipated challenges, I was excited for the opportunity to showcase my abilities. I assembled a talented team and worked closely with them to create a creative and impactful campaign. We worked late into the night each day, and there were moments of anxiety, but we remained united and completed the project together. As a result, the campaign was a tremendous success. The product launch exceeded expectations, and the client was thrilled. The campaign received industry attention and even won an award, marking one of the proudest moments of my career. It was a moment when all the years of hard work and perseverance paid off. Through this experience, I reaffirmed the importance of believing in myself and my own abilities. Dr. Smith always provided support and guidance, teaching me that recovery isn't a straight path, and that setbacks are also part of growth. At times, it felt like starting over, but she reminded me of my achievements and helped me keep moving forward. Among the programs we did, one stood out and resonated deeply with me. It was a therapy exercise in which I wrote a letter to my younger self. Dr. Smith suggested that I write down everything I wished that young girl, who endured so much, had known back then. It was an emotionally stirring experience for me, but it became a way to free my heart. I told my past self that she had a strong and resilient spirit and was deserving of love and happiness. I assured her that the abuse she experienced was never her fault and that a wonderful future awaited her. This letter allowed me to look at myself from a new perspective, reaffirming that overcoming suffering requires inner strength. Now I am living in a much better environment, enjoying life. I've learned to protect my boundaries and to cherish my happiness. My career continues to grow, and I now mentor newcomers to the industry. Being in a position to guide others and help them overcome their own challenges brings me immense fulfillment. Looking back, I can see just how far I have come. The journey of healing continues, but I feel that even a difficult path is worth taking, one step at a time. I've learned that sometimes it's essential to rely on others and allow them to support me while treating myself with kindness. I've also realized I possess more strength than I once thought. Life gradually moved in a positive direction. My career was going well. I maintained healthy boundaries with harmful people, and I continued therapy. Just when I felt I had finally overcome the past, a letter arrived, shattering that sense of hope. To my shock, I was being sued by my parents. The reason for the lawsuit was absurd. They claimed I should repay the costs of raising me. Furthermore, they said that once the trial was over, they planned to request financial support from me to help raise my adopted stepbrother, Jacob, making me feel as though all the independence and growth I had achieved was being denied. I resolved to stand up against this. The court date was set for Monday morning, and although I felt anxious, I entered the courtroom with a strong sense of self-belief. I sat on the opposite side from my parents. Next to me was my lawyer, Mr. Grant, while Jacob, my unfamiliar stepbrother, sat confidently by my parents' side. Although Mr. Grant assured me that our position was strong, my anxiety didn't fade. The first day of the trial was grueling. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Edwards, confidently laid out their case, arguing that my parents had shouldered substantial financial burdens for my sake and that it was necessary to compensate them. He described my parents as loving and devoted. When it was our turn, Mr. Grant calmly dismantled their claims, presenting some evidence of the abuse I had suffered. He strongly asserted, using my therapy records and testimonies from witnesses of their behavior, that I had no obligation to support my stepbrother. That week was intense, with the courtroom turning into a battleground, each day presenting new challenges and waves of emotion. On Tuesday, my mother took the stand, shedding tears with a dramatic performance. She tearfully claimed that she had always dedicated herself to me and couldn't understand why I felt abused. Despite my anger at her false tears, I remained composed. Then, on Wednesday, my father's testimony began. During his testimony, he took an aggressive stance, accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful. He even raised his voice in anger, directing his fury at me from the witness stand. The judge intervened, warning him about his attitude and instructing him to remain calm. Mr. Grant skillfully exposed the inconsistencies in his testimony. Thursday was the hardest day for me. Jacob took the stand. He was a teenager, probably 16 or 17 years old. When he looked at me, his eyes were filled with hatred. He claimed that the lack of support from my side had deprived him of proper education and opportunities. It was clear that my parents had instilled a sense of malice toward me and him, and it was painful to see someone so young harboring such intense anger. By Friday, I was utterly exhausted, but I took the stand with a sense of determination. The composed and supportive Mr. Grant guided me through my testimony, helping me speak about the abuse I had endured and the many years I had been manipulated. I explained the trauma from my past and the steps I had taken to overcome it. At that moment, I noticed the jury. They were listening intently, and some of them were visibly moved by my story. The weekend passed quickly with preparations and tension leading up to the final day of the trial. It was clear that Monday would be crucial for us. Mr. Grant and I meticulously prepared, ready to address any statements Mr. Edwards might make. When Monday arrived, the courtroom was filled with a palpable sense of tension. Mr. Edwards gave his closing argument, strongly asserting that my parents were the victims. In response, Mr. Grant delivered a powerful speech, reminding the jury of the abuse I had endured and emphasizing that my parents bore responsibility for it. During this, my parents remained silent. A long period passed, and the jury left the courtroom to deliberate. Each tick of the clock heightened the unbearable tension as time weighed heavily on us. Eventually, the jury returned, and the verdict was finally delivered. I had won. An overwhelming sense of relief filled my heart, and I realized that I had triumphed before my parents. As the judge announced the verdict, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. At that very moment, an unexpected event occurred. Jacob, who had shown uncontrollable anger throughout the trial, suddenly ran toward me. He was holding a baseball bat. The courtroom erupted in chaos, and someone screamed. He swung the bat at me. I managed to dodge, but the bat grazed my arm, sending a sharp pain through me. The security guards forcefully restrained Jacob, pinning him to the ground as he screamed in a fit of rage. The courtroom was in turmoil, with people trying to grasp what had just happened amid the confusion. Mr. Grant and the security guards quickly escorted me out of the courtroom. Once outside, my heart was pounding, and it took a moment to regain my composure. The adrenaline was still surging through my body, and a dull pain lingered in the arm where the bat had struck. Mr. Grant promptly arranged for an ambulance, and I was taken to the hospital for evaluation. Fortunately, the injury wasn't severe, but the incident was a shocking experience for me. Jacob's outburst only worsened the situation, and my parents claimed it was my fault for intentionally provoking him, trying to dismiss his actions as nothing more than childish tantrums, hoping to turn the incident to their advantage. However, Jacob's assault had been clearly captured on the courtroom surveillance cameras. Jacob was immediately taken into custody. Although my parents tried to distort the incident to suit their narrative, within days, the media began to take interest, with reporters seeking details about the trial and Jacob. I refused all interviews, focusing instead on healing and rebuilding a positive life. During this time, Mr. Grant arranged for a restraining order against my parents and Jacob. Although the shock of the assault lingered, they would never be able to come near me again. I felt that, through the trial, I had confronted my past and was finally able to close that chapter. I had won the case, and I continued seeing Dr. Smith for counseling afterward. She helped me calmly process the recent events and confront the residual fears and anxieties in my heart. She reminded me that I was now steering my own life and was no longer a victim. Through this experience, I gained an even stronger resilience. I became an advocate for others who had suffered from abuse, sharing my experiences in support groups and online talks. My work was going well, and I felt a profound sense of accomplishment in helping others heal their emotional wounds. Then, a few months later, a special opportunity arose. After the trial, I was invited to speak at an event for people facing adversity, where I shared my story from the stage with an audience. At that moment, I realized that it's not the past events that shape us, but rather the strength to confront them and the belief in ourselves. Life is far from perfect, and I still encounter difficulties, but I am now certain that I can overcome any trial. This experience has strengthened my heart immensely. I am now determined to help others find their own strength based on my own experiences. Following the incident in court, Jacob was arrested and charged with assault. The security camera had clearly captured the moment he attacked me, leaving undeniable evidence. The trial proceeded quickly, and given his age and the severity of the assault, a guilty verdict was reached. As a result, he was sent to a juvenile detention center. The judge determined that Jacob's deep-seated issues stemmed from the influence of our parents and mandated therapy for him. The impact of Jacob's actions reverberated through the entire family. Child Protective Services, CPS, stepped in and began a detailed investigation into whether my parents were fit to raise children. The abuse I had suffered, as well as the lack of proper support and environment provided to Jacob, came to light, exposing the harsh realities of the household. CPS concluded that my parents were unfit to continue parenting and decided to revoke their legal guardianship rights. Jacob entered a rehabilitation program in the juvenile center, and the other foster children in my parents' care were also removed for their protection. This unexpected development stirred many emotions within me. I felt that the time had finally come for my parents to face the consequences of their actions, and I felt validated in my position. At the same time, it was painful to witness the severe impact my parents had on Jacob. I hoped he would find healing amid the turmoil and discover a path to a brighter future. Through therapy, I found my own healing. Dr. Smith, my therapist, became a reliable source of support as I coped with the aftermath of the trial and the assault. She encouraged me to focus on the positive changes in my life and to build a future rather than being held back by the past. Thanks to her, I began opening my heart to new relationships. Though I had once been cautious with others, I realized that connection with people was essential to the healing process. It was around this time that I met John. We were introduced through a mutual friend at a dinner party. He was gentle, humorous, and incredibly kind, and we quickly became close, forming a deep bond. We shared a similar passion for art and travel. I had never felt such a profound connection with someone before. Our friendship soon evolved into something deeper, and we began dating. However, our relationship also faced its challenges. I opened up to John about my past. He trusted me to an astonishing degree, yet I sometimes still felt anxious and worried. Trusting someone wasn't easy for me, and there were times when I felt overwhelmed by my insecurities. But he was always patient, consistently willing to talk things through to understand me, easing my anxieties. Around 6 months into our relationship, an unforgettable moment occurred. We had planned a short weekend trip to a mountain cabin, intending to unwind and relax away from everyday life. However, on the first night, I had a nightmare about being attacked in the courtroom. I woke up in terror, and John rushed over to me as I panicked. He held me gently as I cried, comforting me by saying, "It's okay, I'm here with you." At that moment, I realized my feelings for him were unwavering. I knew he was more than just a partner. He was someone who genuinely cherished me and would always be there to support me. I began envisioning a future with John. We shared our dreams and goals and discovered that we held the same values. As our relationship reached its 1-year mark, John planned a date reminiscent of our first, ending with a proposal. Our engagement period was filled with days of excitement for the future. We held a warm wedding, surrounded by close friends and family. On our wedding day, in a beautiful garden filled with blooming flowers, we exchanged our vows in the presence of our loved ones. As I stood holding John's hand, looking into his eyes, I felt peace and joy I had never experienced before. The ceremony became a time to celebrate love and resilience. Friends from my support group, colleagues, and professors who had supported me during college attended, including Professor Adams, whose presence was a delightful surprise. He had encouraged me throughout my studies, and it was a precious moment to celebrate this special day together. It was a symbol of the new family I was building, based on choice and mutual respect. One of the most memorable moments of the ceremony was Lisa's heartfelt speech at the reception. Lisa, too, had overcome her own struggles, and through her speech, we reaffirmed our bond. She spoke proudly of my growth, my newfound happiness, and the strong path I was now walking. Her words brought tears to my eyes, and her friendship and support became a cornerstone in my married life. After the wedding, John and I started our new life together. We found a comfortable apartment and began decorating it with art pieces and memories we shared, envisioning our future. We traveled together, found new hobbies, and continued supporting each other's dreams. John encouraged me to pursue art more seriously, which led me to pick up my paintbrush again. I even held a small solo exhibition locally. It was a significant step for me. Work was going well too, and I was promoted to a senior position. As a new project manager, my responsibilities increased, but I was eager to take on new challenges. One of the largest projects I led was a marketing campaign for a nonprofit organization focused on mental health awareness. This project held special meaning for me, and I poured my heart into it. The campaign was successful, raising awareness and funding for mental health services. It was incredibly fulfilling to know that my work had a positive impact on the world. As time passed, John and I began discussing expanding our family and made the decision to adopt a child. We both wanted to restore the love and support that each of us had once lost. The adoption process was long and sometimes frustrating, but it was worth every moment. We were finally united with a lovely little girl named Mia. The moment we welcomed her into our family was an irreplaceable, joyful experience for us. Mia brought so much happiness and light into our lives. Parenthood was a fresh and exciting challenge, and John and I continued to provide loving support, navigating the sleepless nights and the joys and sorrows of Mia's growth together. In doing so, we were able to break the cycle of abuse and neglect we had experienced, providing her with a nurturing environment. Her smiles and curiosity constantly remind me of the new life I've built from my past experiences. I continued attending therapy, with Dr. Smith remaining a steadfast source of support. She became an essential figure in helping me balance work and parenting, sharing strategies to navigate life's ups and downs. Her guidance was invaluable to me, and without her support, I wouldn't have come this far. Looking back, I see how I've grown from a frightened child living in fear of abuse to someone confident, surrounded by a loving family. I never imagined my life would turn out this way. Though there remains a bit of the old pain, it has become part of my story, a symbol of healing, resilience, and hope for the future.
Witnessing my husband's selfish claim over the house of my late father, with whom we were living, as he declares, "I'm going to make my father-in-law's house mine. Can you really not understand anything?" My husband's shallow remark made me laugh beyond surprise. Seeing my long underestimated husband's family cornered by my retaliation. I, Katie Manning, had been living with my father and my husband, Ben. Since my mother passed away when I was in high school, my father raised me with endless love. My deep affection for my father remains unchanged. When I proposed living with my increasingly worrisome father to Ben, he warmly welcomed the idea of us living together in our home. "Are you really okay with this?" "I can manage on my own," my father asked me anxiously, a concern stemming from our cohabitation proposal. When I suggested living together, he initially smiled happily but soon looked worried. "I am always worried I might be a burden to you." My father always considered my feelings. However, after I expressed my desire to stay with him and Ben agreed, my father accepted with a smile. Today, Ben and I are moving into my childhood home. We began unpacking the boxes brought by the movers. "Again with this? Haven't I always said this is what I wanted?" "You're right, Dad. Plus, this place has better access to work, which is also convenient for me," we explained, and my father nodded with a faint smile. After unpacking, we found my father had prepared coffee for us. I was about to take a coffee break when I heard footsteps coming downstairs. "I thought you might want a break, so I prepared some for you too." Grateful for the warm hospitality, Ben and I enjoyed a break with him, feeling happy about the enriched life that lay ahead. After a short rest, we resumed unpacking, rolling up our sleeves for another push. "Hey, if you want, you can quit your job. It's okay to stay and support your father." During the work, Ben made a surprising proposal, pausing me in astonishment. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Moving back here, we've cut down on our rent expenses, right? If you quit your job, taking care of your father and having fewer worries might be better, right?" Currently, both of us work, with me mainly handling household chores. Though Ben helps sometimes, our days are still quite busy. I mulled over Ben's suggestion, feeling delighted at the prospect of spending more time with my father. Moreover, focusing on household chores seemed like it would reduce both mental and physical stress. Ben's proposal was very appealing, but it meant becoming financially dependent on him, which worried me. Grateful for his acceptance of the cohabitation, I pondered whether I should rely on Ben further. With a change of living environment, we decided to continue as before for now. Ben said, "I don't want you to overdo it, but the cohabitation proposal was mine." I felt I couldn't always depend on Ben. A month has passed. Hey, maybe quitting your job for your father's sake is the best after all. When Ben suggested this again, I also thought it might be the best course of action. Living together turned out to lighten my daily load unexpectedly, mainly because my father took on household chores. Returning home, I found my father had already prepared dinner or cleaned the house. Yet, this seemed to increase his burden, making me feel guilty and contemplate quitting my job to take over the chores. Yeah, I might do that. I feel bad putting financial pressure on you, Ben. What are you thinking? There's no need to worry about that. Hearing those words, I made up my mind to quit my job. When I told my father about this decision, he urged me to continue working and leave the household chores to him. But after expressing my desire to help with the chores, he understood. As a result, I chose to quit my job and dedicate myself to our home, leading to more fulfilling days spent with my father. However, gradually, changes began to appear in our lives. I'm home. Welcome back, Ben. It must have been a tough day. Yow. Is dinner ready? Ben's return home became later, and by the time he got back, my father was already asleep, decreasing the opportunities for us to eat together. Today, I was watching TV with Dad, but can you keep it down? I'm eating. Oh, sorry. When my father is nearby, Ben is as kind as he used to be, but lately, when it's just the two of us, he becomes quite cold. I feel like my quitting the job has added stress on him, and all I can do is apologize. After Ben finishes his dinner, I start to prepare his favorite evening drink, but he gets up to leave the dining area. Where are you going? What about your drink? I'm going to take a bath. He answered shortly and left, closing the door behind him with a bang. Whether he's in a bad mood or simply tired, these days leave me unable to help but sigh. The next day, I wait for Ben's return after my father has gone to sleep, but even past midnight, he hasn't come home. Worried, I try calling him but get no response. Just as I start to panic, thinking something has happened, an email arrives. What? The cold text of the email seemed to convey his feelings. Despite sighing, I felt relieved that he was safe. Still at work? I was worried because it's late. I replied, and his response came quickly. On a business trip. Those few words let me know he wouldn't be coming home tonight. I hadn't been informed about the trip, and I wish he had told me sooner, but expressing that might only irritate him further. So, you're on a business trip, got it. How long will you be away? I sent this message, but no reply came. After that, Ben's business trips became more frequent, and he stopped telling me when he would leave or return home. My father, trying to be considerate, would ask about the situation when Ben was home, and he would answer with a cheerful smile that no longer seemed directed at me. No problem, I'm working hard for our family. Seeing his reaction made me feel like he was dissatisfied with me, and though I suggested we talk, he would say, I'm just busy or I'm tired. Let's talk later, and we never had a serious discussion. Eventually, Ben rarely returned home. Amidst growing distress, I began to suspect he might be having an affair when I unexpectedly received a message from my mother-in-law. I need the address of the company Ben works for. A one-line email without any greetings. My in-laws have not been fond of me since the beginning of our marriage, throwing harsh words and malicious actions my way, leading to a natural distance between us. Ben understood this situation, and although it never worsened our relationship due to my in-laws' issues, it didn't improve either, and we continued to keep our distance. Receiving this sudden email from my mother-in-law, I pondered its intent before replying. It's been a while. May I know why you need Ben's work address? After sending this reply, it seemed she was indeed upset, as I immediately received an angry call. Hello, it's been a while. It's been a while. You've made Ben take care of your father and quit your job to do nothing at home. How can you do such a thing? Because of you, he's now returned to our house. He forgot his lunchbox today and went to the office, so I'm trying to deliver it. What are you going to do about this attitude? It's unforgivable. Give me the address right away. And from now on, Ben will be living at our house. Shocked by my mother-in-law's angry words, I was left speechless. It turned out that the days Ben claimed to be away on business trips, he had actually returned to his parents' home. Learning how my in-laws spoke about me was deeply shocking. It was Ben who said it would be okay for me to quit my job, yet I couldn't help but feel his true intentions were different. Overwhelmed with sadness, I felt like I couldn't stop my tears. Without arguing, I simply provided Ben's work address and ended the call. Trying to calm myself, I made some coffee in the living room when my father came in. Asking him if he would like some coffee with a smile as usual, he looked at me, smiled back, and accepted. As we enjoyed our coffee, my father started talking about the past. Your mom and I used to argue a lot when we were young. There were many misunderstandings, but we always tried to be honest with each other, and that's how we solved many issues. Couples who can argue and then fix their relationship might understand each other better and become stronger, he said warmly. His words deeply resonated with me, and I decided to have a serious conversation with Ben. That's true, Dad? Thank you, I told him, and he responded with a kind smile. Afterward, I sent an email to Ben outlining the facts from my conversation with his mother and expressing my desire to talk. However, Ben replied dismissively, making me sigh deeply. Anger towards Ben began to build inside me. I wanted to respond immediately in my emotional state, but took a deep breath to calm myself. This situation led to Ben stopping his contributions to our household finances. Attempts to contact him were met with silence, and messages about living expenses were ignored. My love for him gradually faded due to his selfish behavior. Finding no meaning in our marriage, thoughts of divorce crossed my mind. I was disappointed in Ben for being so irresponsible and self-centered. However, not wanting to worry my father further, I decided to postpone discussions about divorce and support myself using my savings from before we were married. Getting used to Ben's absence, I enjoyed my days with my father until he suddenly fell ill. Rushed to the hospital, we were told he didn't have much time left. Overwhelmed and unable to stop my tears, I couldn't hear the doctors or nurses. Visiting my father's room, he tried to smile and apologized for worrying me. Holding his hand, I smiled back, saying, "Don't worry, you'll get better," despite my eyes swelling with tears. Seeing my father, who looked sad despite laughing and asking, "What's with that face?" I felt tears welling up in my eyes again. Because hospitalization was necessary, I temporarily returned home to prepare what was needed. However, upon returning to my childhood home alone, I was overwhelmed by a sense of loneliness, and I couldn't stop my tears. This house, where I grew up since I was a child. Even though I had left it when I got married, this place is filled with countless memories. Unable to bear the loneliness of being alone, I simply cried incessantly. During this difficult time, I received a cold message from Ben. "Since we're living separately, handle your own expenses. Maybe use your father-in-law's pension?" Reading this, I threw my phone in frustration. All my feelings for Ben vanished at that moment. Shaken by anger and sorrow, I realized dwelling on my feelings for Ben was a waste. Wondering how my father would feel seeing me like this calmed my mind. Regaining my composure, I washed my face and prepared to leave for the hospital. Just then, I received mail containing good news that could change my current situation. Seeing this, I made up my mind. Leaving the documents at home for now, I hurried to the hospital. My father's condition worsened gradually, and I had to accept that our time to say goodbye was nearing. Days passed with joyous conversations at the hospital, only to return home to tears. Eventually, my father passed away peacefully. I was there to witness his serene departure, but the sense of loss overwhelmed me, leaving me in tears. However, the legacy my father left was immeasurable and deeply etched in my heart. The funeral, with the help of relatives, went smoothly, but Ben and my in-laws did not show up until the end. I hadn't specifically informed them about my father's passing, so I hadn't expected them to attend. Nonetheless, it seemed they had learned of his death through relatives because, a few days after settling the estate and paperwork, Ben suddenly appeared with a lot of luggage. "It's been a while. I heard your father passed away." Seeing Ben's face stirred anger within me, but I suppressed the impulse and took a deep breath to remain calm. "What do you want? What's with the luggage? Isn't that a bit harsh for a husband returning home?" "Oh, this luggage is my parents' stuff." "Huh?" The fact that Ben used the word husband was profoundly irritating. His words made no sense to me. After he had left the house, stopped providing for living expenses, and lived as he pleased, claiming now to be a husband was beyond surprising. It was appalling. I was at a loss for words. Were you waiting for me? Jobless, struggling with living expenses, and left alone to care for your father? Happy, are you? So happy you're speechless? No, it seems I was the one caught in your plan. Ben's mention of a plan caught my attention, prompting me to ask for clarification. The answer I received was unbelievable. Living with an old man was something I couldn't accept. Impossible to live with the elderly. But saying that might make you think about divorce. If we divorced, I couldn't get this house. So, I chose to live together and pushed you into unemployment by pretending to be the ideal husband, making you dependent on me and the elderly man. That way, the house would become mine. Hearing his words, I found myself glaring at Ben sharply. This was not normal thinking. Reflecting on our marriage made me despise myself and feel deep guilt towards my father. I struggled to contain my trembling anger. Your story doesn't add up. You're the one who left and stopped paying the living expenses. When I pointed this out, Ben scratched his head in annoyance. Yeah, I had reached my limit. I didn't realize I was so short-tempered. But I thought the plan would work even without me, assuming you wouldn't have the courage to bring up divorce. His smug smile made me forget what had ever attracted me to him. I no longer wanted to see his face or hear his voice. My feelings towards Ben had become unbearable. The plan worked. This house might be old, but it's spacious and well located. It'll be worth a lot when sold. From today, my parents and I will live here. Could there be anyone more self-centered? It seemed morality was foreign to him, which wasn't surprising considering his parents. As I stood dumbfounded, he continued to insult me further. The house of your father is mine. Get out. Watching my in-laws' belongings being moved in, I realized Ben was completely oblivious to the situation. Ben looked down on me confidently, disrespecting my father and making it impossible to leave things as they were. Seeing Ben standing there so smugly made me burst into laughter, unable to hold it back. My sudden laughter confused Ben. Have you lost your mind? That's the perfect description for you. The thought of confronting him with reality made my laughter uncontrollable. Seeing me laugh, Ben became furious. However, ignoring his reaction, I laid out the reality. Don't you know? This is my house. It could never become yours. Surprised and frozen by my words, I continued. Besides, you and I are now unrelated. Didn't your mother tell you? Laughing as I said this, Ben seemed utterly stunned. Then, he immediately started contacting someone on his smartphone, apparently his mother. What, Mom? Katie's saying something weird. We haven't divorced, have we? She said I hadn't heard anything from you. What do you mean, you sent it? Really? How did this happen? Watching Ben's speechless reaction, it seemed he finally grasped the situation. After ending the call, Ben's expression was twisted as if he was looking at something incomprehensible. Did you really submit a divorce application? He asked. Yes, I did. The day your father was taken to the hospital, your mother sent me a completed divorce form by post, which I happily submitted the next day. Your mother has her moments, doesn't she? I replied. Damn it. Even if it arrived, you weren't supposed to submit it. It was something my mother made me write just in case, not intending to actually divorce. Ben was furious. But you filled it out yourself, didn't you? Whether or not you intended to doesn't matter. I completed the divorce process as you wished, so you should be thanking me, I calmly retorted. Seeing Ben frustrated, I felt a sense of relief inside. The divorce form from my mother-in-law might have been intended as harassment, but for me, wanting a divorce, it was a stroke of luck. Later, Ben anxiously questioned me about property division and the house's ownership, but I dismissed his concerns. It was clear there were no significant assets to divide, so I informed him there was no need for division. I explained that due to the short cohabitation period with my father and the assets being in my father's name at the time of the divorce, they were not subject to division. Ben insisted on a financial demand, claiming even my savings from before marriage should be split, but I informed him his claims had no basis. He turned pale, attempting to argue but only opening and closing his mouth, resembling a fish out of water. Though tempted to mock him, I chose to maintain a mature demeanor and calm myself. Let's send this here. It's problematic for someone to bring their belongings into another person's home uninvited, which clearly constitutes trespassing. If you plan to stay any longer, I'll have to call the police. As I said this, Ben hurriedly gathered his belongings and left. I spread salt at the entrance and prayed to my parents' portraits. This is for the best. I'll become stronger, so please watch over me. Thinking of my parents meeting again in heaven eased my loneliness and lightened my heart. Emboldened by this new resolve, I began looking for a job. It was then that a friend contacted me, knowing I was job hunting, and offered to introduce me to a job that matched my expertise. Thanks to their recommendation, I quickly secured a position after an interview with HR. A few days later, I received a message from Ben. Sorry for being stubborn the other day. Actually, I wanted to start over with you, which is why I came to the house. Finding the message unbelievable, I struggled with how to reply but ultimately decided to ignore it. Yet, Ben continued to send poetic messages like a relentless suitor. Once, we were like the sun and the moon. Days spent longing for you, unreachable, are now behind us. Now, we can be closer. Without your love, I'm nothing. Won't you give me your overflowing love once more? I'll dedicate everything to you. I treasure you more than anything. Our love will last forever. No matter where I am, I'll continue to love you, for your heart is my home. Each time I received these poetic messages, I shared them with colleagues, wondering if they could serve as material for work. Currently working as an illustrator in a cartoon editorial department, these emails sometimes prove to be useful inspiration. Look, the melodramatic stalker is back. It's great to have something to laugh about in tough times. Unknowingly, Ben has become a source of amusement. Feeling only discomfort from his messages, I've been avoiding replying. Amid these days, the doorbell at my home rang. Looking through the peephole, I saw Ben standing outside. I had never expected him to show up in person, so I decided to call the police immediately. Hey, I know you're in there. I can see your car. Please, just listen to me. I'm really in trouble right now. There was talk of moving into this house, so my parents sold their home. Now, I have nowhere to go. Help me. I could hear his voice shouting from outside, but what does that have to do with me? It highlights his recklessness for not correcting the situation the day they misunderstood this house as their own. His emails showed he hadn't given up, but I was merely astonished by his and his family's naive thinking. While the police were convincing Ben to leave, he resisted strongly but was eventually taken away by them. After that, when there was no response to the flood of Romeo emails, contacts from my in-laws began. At first, they tried calling, but when I ignored that, they switched to emails. How can you know we're in a difficult situation and not offer any help? You should contact us immediately. Why not have a serious discussion? We were once a family. Isn't it too cruel to be so indifferent? You caused us to lose our home. Now we live in a dilapidated apartment. Why won't you hand over the house? You must have received inheritance from your father. You're not struggling financially. We quit our jobs. You should take responsibility. If the child is like this, of course, the parents are too. Do they think their decisions will always prevail? I was infuriated by the audacious emails. How can they disregard others to such an extent? Although I intended to ignore them, I ended up blocking Ben and my in-laws' contacts. I considered changing my contact information, but it felt ridiculous to spend money just because of them. I was determined to ignore them, but I reached my limit. I optimistically thought blocking them would restore my peace, but soon realized my approach was short-sighted. One day, my former in-laws showed up at my doorstep. Despite being fed up with their endless harassment, understanding they knew my address made me realize such incidents were inevitable. However, I did not want to leave this house filled with many memories. Come out, you know we're in trouble. Change your mood? I'm proposing we get back together, accept it. How can you ignore someone in trouble? What kind of human does that? The doorbell and knocking were incessant, but I did not hesitate to call the police. Suddenly, the noise from outside stopped. Peeking through the hole, I saw an unfamiliar man arguing with my former in-laws. "Go home, you're bothering people." The sudden appearance of the man puzzled my former in-laws. "What did you say? Who are you?" Could it be an affair partner? Unfazed by their backlash, the man looked at them coldly. "Your attitude is the problem. Look around. This is a residential area. Look, people are gathering because of you. You're really causing a disturbance." Indeed, through the limited view of the peephole, I could see neighbors gathering, which felt somewhat embarrassing. However, seeing my former family flustered and stuttering but was when the police arrived. It seemed one of the officers had encountered this scene before, saying to Ben, "It's you guys again." Hearing this, my former in-laws' faces turned red. "How much trouble are you going to cause? Get some awareness." I silently thanked the man as he walked away, relieved. Afterward, my former in-laws were taken away in a police vehicle, and the onlookers dispersed. Hours later, the doorbell rang again, and peering through the peephole, I saw the man from the earlier argument standing there. Surprised to see him, I hesitated before cautiously opening the door. The man greeted me with a warm smile. "It's been a while. If you were back, you should have let me know." I recognized his face, but I couldn't immediately recall who he was until he reintroduced himself. "Don't tell me you've forgotten. It's been over 10 years, after all. Remember me? I'm Scott." Hearing his name, memories flooded back. Scott, my childhood friend, known as Scotty in our hometown. Scotty. Now that you mention it, you really are Scotty. Scott used to live next door and we hadn't seen each other since changing elementary schools. Finally remembered, I've moved back to the area. We're neighbors again. It's really been a long time. And thank you for earlier. It meant a lot to me. After expressing my gratitude again, Scott just laughed it off, making me smile too. We caught up on old times, and I ended up telling him about the recent disturbances. Scott promised to support me whenever needed, proving to be a reliable friend. When I mentioned my father's passing, Scott offered to pay his respects, remembering him from our childhood. The joy of having someone who shared my past was profound. Days passed, and I received a letter from a law firm out of the blue containing a notification. Opening the unexpected envelope, I found it claimed I had committed infidelity during my marriage, demanding payment for damages. Shocked by the situation, I noticed a message from an unknown email address on my smartphone titled regarding the notification. The message read, "Your ex-husband Ben has initiated a lawsuit claiming marital infidelity on your part. Admitting and dealing with this straightforwardly will avoid escalating the matter. We plan to inform your workplace. Considering your future, we advise settling this matter promptly," suggesting a threat. It was clear this was a scheme by my former in-laws, not a genuine liar's notification. Upon closer inspection, the quality of the notification raised doubts about its authenticity, prompting me to consult a real lawyer. The lawyer confirmed it was a complete forgery, and the supposed attorney's name was not registered, revealing the document as fake. Despite knowing better, I decided to play along in my reply, indicating a willingness to consider their claims but asking for evidence of my supposed infidelity. "The alleged mental anguish suffered by Ben is immense, and we seek compensation for that," they replied, without any tangible proof. Such baseless claims seemed unlikely to involve legal professionals. I assert there was no infidelity on my part, hence no evidence exists. It's hard to believe professionals would intervene based on such unfounded claims, wouldn't you agree? Moved by Ben's passion, we wish to assist him. We expect your sincere cooperation, not intending to escalate this matter further. Quite an emotional approach for a professional. You're aware impersonating a lawyer is illegal and punishable, right? Just to confirm, you do hold legitimate qualifications? This inquiry halted their previously prompt responses. Curious about the next move, I received a new email. "I am indeed a professional. However, your arguments were unbeatable. We've decided to withdraw the lawsuit. No need for withdrawal, as I have no passion for this matter and am entirely calm about being falsely accused of infidelity. I intend to legally counter this. Looking forward to meeting this passionate lawyer in court." After this exchange, all communication ceased. However, the silence did not last long as my former in-laws once again showed up at my house. Despite it being late at night, they started begging loudly at the front door, "We made a mistake. Please spare us from the lawsuit." Awakened by the noise, I checked the time and it was past 1 a.m. Anger at being deprived of sleep reached its peak, and I yelled, "Please be quiet." Stop bothering me." Never having seen me so angry before, my former in-laws couldn't hide their surprise. "If you come any closer and cause more trouble, I won't overlook it." With that declaration and grabbing my father's wooden sword that was at hand, my former in-laws' expressions changed drastically. Especially my former mother-in-law and Ben, who seemed to tremble in fear, whispering, "We're so sorry. You should have changed your actions from the beginning if you were sorry. Never appear before me again." I scolded, and my former mother-in-law nodded with tears in her eyes. Then, the lights of a patrol car caught my eye, heading our way. Due to the late hour, it seemed neighbors had reported them, and my former in-laws were immediately taken away by the arriving officers. They tried to attack me with a wooden sword. My former mother-in-law pointed at me and appealed to the police, but she was taken away. When the police asked me, "Is this true?" I explained the doorbell kept ringing and someone was banging on the door at this hour, so I took the wooden sword for self-defense, to which they nodded understandingly. Scott was by my side and told the police he had witnessed the former in-law's repeated visits. With his testimony, the police deemed the actions malicious and promptly took my former in-laws away, finally restoring peace. The next day, following Scott's advice, I filed a report. With multiple incidents involving the police already, the process went smoothly. Scott mentioned he had noticed the former in-law's assault the previous night and was about to say something when he heard me shouting. According to him, my voice was terrifying. Subsequently, a restraining order was issued against my former in-laws and they never troubled me again. Moreover, someone had recorded the commotion, and the footage ended up on the internet, making them the secret talk of the neighborhood, unable to move due to lack of financial means. It's unclear how they're living now, but they're probably relying on the former in-laws' retirement funds. As for me, Scott and I grew closer rapidly, and within a few months of reuniting, he confessed his love and we started dating. Scott always makes me smile, and the time he spent with him is genuinely happy. I feel like this turn of events is a gift from my father, filling me with gratitude.